są takie budowane selektory w JavaScriptach.
So just to start off, my name is Jeremy Orlow. So I am a software engineer working on Chrome. A lot of the features I'm going to talk about today, I either, well, none of them I actually worked on directly, but a lot of them I worked with the people who worked on them or consulted on them or was involved in some of the standards-based stuff. So I have quite a bit of involvement in the development of a lot of this stuff. So first of all, you might be wondering, kind of, why is Google and others, why are we so excited about HTML5? What's the big deal? And it really comes down to these three things more than anything. Openness, features, and support. I'm going to talk about the features side in just a little bit in historical context. Support is something that hopefully you're seeing that a lot of the browsers are very quickly starting to support this stuff a lot more. In fact, let's talk about this quote real quick. So HTML5 is the only true cross-platform solution for everything, including Apple's iOS platform. Does anybody have any guesses who said this? Or at least what company they're from? Yes, Microsoft. You guys obviously heard this, but yeah, this was actually just a week and a half ago. One of Microsoft's presidents actually said this, that HTML5 is the future, and they realize it. And the openness is also one of the very important parts, and this is something where the web's kind of started to fail early on, where everything was open, but there were 5 different open standards. And this is something that I think all the browser vendors have been working very hard to make sure that things don't get fragmented like they once did. And make sure that even if we experiment with things, once it's clear which is the best solution, we kind of converge. So before I get any further, I just want to talk about what is HTML5. So HTML5 is a buzzword. There is an actual HTML5 spec. Most people, even purists, don't realize how little of HTML5 is actually in the HTML5 spec. But that's okay, because really HTML5 is kind of talking about the latest in HTML, the latest in CSS, and the latest in JavaScript. And buzzword, so Ajax is a buzzword, and LAMP is a buzzword. When people talk about Ajax, the X means XML, but most people use JSON these days. So it's not a crime to misuse HTML5, at least in my opinion, and I think similar with Apple and the rest of Google. So first of all, like what I was showing in the keynote today, this is completely inside a web browser. I'm hosting it locally because the internet's been flaky, but it could be up on the web or whatever. It's roughly 1,000 lines of HTML, or roughly 1,000 lines of JavaScript, about 200 CSS rules. And just, what's really cool about this is just showing that we're not doing anything crazy. This is just, everything that I'm showing you here is stuff that you can do, you can implement easily yourself. But a lot of these things were hard, if not impossible, not too long ago. So let's talk a little bit about where we've come from and why HTML5 is all of a sudden the next big thing. Even though if you look at this, HTML 1, 2, 3, and 4 all happened in pretty rapid succession and over 10 years ago. So why did we have to wait so long between HTML 4 and 5? And the answer is that up here until about XHTML1, the browser wars were in full swing, and there was lots of competition. And then sometime around then, IE6 came out, and really there was no competition. And so what you see here is for the next, I don't know, it was about 6 or 7 years, pretty much all the development that was happening in the web was people finding new ways to use existing technologies. So people figured out that you can use CSS to design your web page, and that there's a lot of advantages to this, rather than just table-based layouts. Ajax became really popular too. And Ajax was just using technologies that have been there for quite some time. So all these dates are a little bit rough, but it was around, HTML5 has been gaining momentum for a little bit now, but 2009 was kind of when it really started to get a lot of attention and start to get widespread adoption within the browsers. And the point of this is that during the early 90s, there was lots of competition. During, basically the 2000s, there was pretty much none. And now there's tons of competition. So what I think you're going to see is that it's not just HTML5 and then another 10 years before anything else. This is going to be continuing at kind of breakneck pace for the foreseeable future. In fact, there's even more competition now than there was in the 90s. So what are we doing with the web platform? Like, where are we trying to take things? This slide kind of sums it up for the most part. These are kind of the big categories of things that we're looking at. Graphics is a big one. We obviously touched on that some this morning. Video and audio playback, that's kind of the biggest thing when people talk about HTML5. They're usually talking about video. Threads, I'm not going to talk about this at all today. It's a pretty advanced topic, but we have lots of, I'll talk about some resources later if you're interested in multi-threaded kind of programming. Notifications, we'll talk about real-time communication. This is very emerging, the idea of being able to do streaming video on the web. No one has it implemented yet, but I bet you that most of the browsers will a year from now. It's kind of a big hot topic, but nothing concrete to talk about yet. And then storage, that's actually what I work on. Once again, it's a pretty advanced topic, so we're not going to talk about it today. But it's definitely, if you're interested in storing more data on the user's computer than what you can do in a cookie, there's some cool solutions. So really, when we're talking about what is HTML5, and this isn't even everything, but I think the take-home point is it's a big pile of stuff, and it's kind of, the lines are sort of blurry, but that's okay. So let's talk a little bit about some specific features in HTML5. I'm only going to be talking about maybe 10 or 20% of the stuff in it. But these are some of the kind of the bigger items, and most of these are either the ones that have been typically more interesting to developers or the ones that are more mature and thus more available in more browsers. So semantics is kind of an interesting one in that a lot of the benefit is not even in mainstream browsers. So there's various new semantic tags like header, hrgroup, nav, section, article, which basically you can explain through these tags how your page is structured. Another example is some of the microdata, where you can add in tags that basically add semantic information to the data in your web page. So what is this type of stuff good for? Well, the biggest thing is making your page more machine readable. So what this means is search engines can read your page better. That's obviously a good thing. In fact, this little thing down here is showing how using microdata, you can actually influence what snippets Google is going to show your users when they hit your web page in the search results. And they also are used, we don't talk about our specific algorithms, but a lot of search engines do look at these types of things. And the more sense that they can make of your page, the more it can influence the ranking. So the other type of thing that you can do when you make your page more machine readable is you can make it so that other web pages can use it and can, this is sort of the dream of the semantic web. But also things like just adding in a few attributes here and there, you can make your web page much more accessible. So for example, screen readers, so people who are using the web who are blind can actually see your page. A lot of people are surprised that it actually doesn't take a whole lot to make these things work. And another one that I skipped over is some of the new rel tags. So a lot of these are standardizing things that have been used in practice for some time, especially the favicon.ico trick where you can just put that in the root. That's been around for a long time. You could set it in JavaScript. Even for a little while, a lot of browsers have supported this link rel tag. So one of the big things that HTML5 has been doing is taking stuff that some browsers support, some browsers don't. Some browsers support different ways, and trying to standardize how all the different browsers do it. And generally, the spec has not just, let's create a really great way to express these things. It's been, let's look at how this is actually done in practice and how we can make something as backwards compatible as possible. So, a lot of these, like nofollow, have been around for quite some time. This makes it so that search engines, when they're crawling, aren't going to follow a link. So a lot of these tags are actually, not just these tags, a lot of what is in HTML5 is stuff that you've been using already. But it's just trying to make it so that all browsers are going to behave the same. Trying to get more to the point that you can code once and it actually works in every web browser without having to individually look at each one. So that's all I'm going to say for the semantics. Let's talk a little bit about the canvas element. So we, of course, talked about this some this morning, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. So Canvas is one of the most supported of the HTML5 tags. It's going to be in IE9. It's already been in Safari since at least 4, I think, further back. Firefox has had it at least since 3, I think. And, so it's very, very well supported as far as a lot of these features go. And it basically allows you to just draw to the screen at a pixel level. So you do things where you move to a certain position, draw a line, you can draw arcs, make circles, these types of things. You can actually pull in image data. So that's how some of the demos, cool demos where we take like the video tag and split it up into a bunch of pieces. It's actually using this feature where it takes the video, puts it into a canvas, and then manipulates it. So there's a lot that you can do. It's pretty much, if you want to do like 2D pixel level graphics, Canvas is definitely the way to go. So this is another demo from the JS1K contest, which the demo this morning was also from, the Matrix one. And this is, so 1K of everything, JavaScript everything. And you can see how it's like a little game that is drawing pixel level graphics. Oh no, I died. But this is 1K of JavaScript, no images, no nothing. It's just purely drawing various arcs and things like that within Canvas. So another example of what you can do with Canvas is if you were going to make some version of Photoshop in the cloud, you would probably use Canvas. And so there's some of these that have kind of are experimenting with what can we do besides just cloning some sort of image editing program. What can we do some cool stuff in the web, especially with like collaboration. There's some cool your whole friends can draw at the same time type things, but a demo of that. But you can do quite a bit of cool things with Canvas. And then of course we talked about this too, but Canvas 3D, i.e. WebGL. This is just an example of 3D model that can pretty easily load up and play around with. So whereas Canvas 2D is one of the most widely available features, Canvas 3D is it's an interesting one in that it's been spec'd for a while, and I think in the next month or so, all the browsers are gonna from now on, pretty much any browser that's releasing is probably gonna have it because the spec was just so. WebGL follows a slightly different spec process, and in this one, everybody's been holding back until it's finalized, but you're going to see that very soon. So another one of the graphics technologies, it's kind of been around for a while, actually, but is just becoming a first-class system in the web, is SVG. So that stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. So the basic idea is that instead of having a bunch of pixels, you're describing how the image works in mathematical terms, basically. So you can see that as I zoom in, so here I'm at 2200%, and you can see how the edges are so smooth. So there's actually a lot of cool stuff that you can do. This is one of the things that Flash does is vector-based graphics. So this is kind of cool, and it's now completely embedded into HTML. So anywhere you can just say SVG. So you used to have to like include an SVG file, kind of like you would a image, but now you can include it directly. And in this case, we're using web fonts along with SVG to render text along a path. So you can do some really cool stuff where that you used to maybe fire up your image editor, make it, get transparencies right, export it, and then of course you notice that you misspelled a word and you have to go in and re-export things again. And things will be a lot easier as these features get rolled out to more and more users. So let's talk briefly about audio and video, because this is just such a hot topic. So basically with the audio and the video tags, they make it really simple to embed audio and video, surprisingly. So this is actually all that's required to embed a video. You just use video, you can give it a source. Optionally, you can say autoplay and use controls. You can also, from inside JavaScript, control the playback. So, for example, in this case, playing the video, this is the same video you saw earlier. And one of the cool things is that because it's built into the web platform and it's not just a plugin, you can do full things like CSS styling. So in this case, we add an outline and add this. And then we can do something sort of like what we did this morning too, where we're actually rendering the video to a canvas, and then the canvas is splitting up into multiple parts. And so you can do a lot of really cool effects. I've seen ones that the video player is a reflection, so you can actually see like the reflection of the live video down there. And a lot of these things are gimmicky, but they show just the raw power of these things. And the controls, you notice how right here we did the controls attribute. Basically that says that the built-in controls are here, so this is built into Chrome. But you can easily say no controls, and then you can, with just CSS, create whatever look that you want around the video, and then with the JavaScript connection, be able to control the video in various different ways. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you can use the video. So we talked a little bit about some of the integration with the OS. I won't belabor the point too much, but one of the things that you can do now also is that we formalized drag and drop within the web browser. So it used to be that you'd have to use some library to implement this even. But now the drag and drop is kind of a first-class citizen. Not only can you drop in from other web apps or from other applications to the desktop, but the same thing is going to work for inside your application. And it's just as easy as setting up a few event listeners. So for example, the item that's being dragged, you can add a drag start and a drag end, so that you can get events whenever these things happen. So you can kind of control it in quite a few different ways. And then similarly, the drop target, you can find out when the item comes in and when it leaves and so on. I showed this earlier today where you can actually drop stuff in from the desktop. I'll go into a little bit more depth here that basically we're setting up an event so that when we have a drop event, we're going to read the data out. And we're basically doing this with a file reader object. And like I mentioned this morning, this is actually a completely new thing. It used to be that, let's say that somebody used the file picker and picked a file. You would actually have to send it back to the server if you wanted to get the raw bytes from it, which seems crazy, but that was just the only way that it was possible. So this is an emerging standard, but basically all the major browser vendors are 100% on board with making it so that you can actually read files or create files inside the web platform, inside the web browser. So So notifications, I mentioned this a little bit. Let me pop out just to show this. Oh, so I already asked. But basically, once the web app asks for permission, which I've already done previously, I forgot to reset it, you can, basically with just a little bit here, you can create notifications. And in this case, we're supplying a picture, title, and text. But you can also create notifications with raw HTML in it. So think of, like, for example, Outlook. You know, every time that you get an email, it can pop up a little thing saying you have an email. Or calendar applications, same thing. You have an appointment. What's really cool is because you were able to put in any HTML that you want in here, you could have like a snooze button or a dismiss button or a remind me again in 10 minutes type button. You know, basically anything that you might want. And because these are system level notifications, it doesn't matter if you're on some other, you know, you've got some other tab open or you have some other app open and, you know, the web browser is minimized, you're still going to find out that you have the appointment. So it's kind of just another one of the ways that we're trying to make the web browser kind of more of a first-class system. So I, of course, showed you device orientation, just in case you missed it this morning. Basic idea is that you know, the web browser can kind of tell how the device is oriented. And I alluded to this morning, but this obviously isn't the most useful in your laptop. I don't know how many of you, like, you know, would think about like lifting up and turning things around while you're at work or something. But what it really makes sense for is mobiles. I don't know how many of you have, you know, played some game, you know, some racing game that you're turning the device or something like that. But device orientation is very important in mobiles, and so the main reason why we put it in Chrome is mainly for demonstrations. But definitely, we're going to see a lot of adoption of device orientation in mobiles very quickly, we think. And of course, I can show you this demo again if you'd like. You know, with once again, it's just using Canvas and the video and a little kind of ad hoc physics engine, but it's kind of cool. So let's talk about CSS just a little bit. So there's tons and tons and tons of new features in CSS, so I'm only going to go over, you know, a few of them here. But yeah, let's just start at let's start with reflection. Actually, let's start from the bottom. Actually, I don't know where I want to start. So first of all, rounded corners. This is probably something that you guys have seen before, but border radius is kind of one of the biggest examples of some of the first set of CSS features that people have been asking for just like forever, that finally started getting standardized. So it actually started out as dash WebKit dash border radius and dash Moz dash border radius. And what this is, whenever you see a CSS attribute that starts with some sort of prefix like this, it means it's basically experimental. It means it's not standardized, but you know, there's probably at least some conversation that's been started in terms of some standardization. But it also means that it could change. And so when you see something end up without the WebKit prefix or the dash Moz prefix or the dash MS prefix, it basically means that it's kind of graduated from, you know, graduated into standards land. So border radius is one of the great examples of something that at first people thought was kind of silly until they noticed how many people were using it. And the reason why is just that there's just so many graphics that you had to open up some image editor if you wanted to edit, but that's just a pain. Because it means that your content is less maintainable. It's harder, you know, if you're doing the rounded corners in Photoshop, then there's lots of tricks to be able to use them in your page, but it's just a pain. And so CSS is trying to address a lot of the common issues that people have, and maybe some of the less common ones, like hue, saturation, luminescence, so different color models. But yeah. So another one of the cool features that for a long time people have done in JavaScript libraries, but you can now do native in the web browser, is transforms. So for example, you can see this is the same image repeated many times with various different rotations, scaling, skew. So some of these things you could do before, in the browser, but a lot of these things, it was hard to do. Scaling was probably the main one that was easy to do, but it often looked bad. Now another thing that we've added is WebKit transitions. And I think Mozilla has a similar feature like this. And the basic idea is making it so that through CSS you can tell it basic animations. So for example here, when I hover over, it's basically turning off whatever the styling. So you can see on the skew ones, when I hover over, it does that. So it's pretty cool that just like with basically just one line here, adding the WebKit transition, WebKit transform, saying that it happens over 2 seconds and it eases in and out. So in other words, if you look at the end and the beginning, it kind of slows down. Which is very little code. You can actually code these things up. What's really great about transforms and transitions is if you really want to, so let's say that 50% of your users are in a web browser that supports something like this, or let's even say 20%. The question can be, well, why would I add something that only 20% of my browsers are going to be able to see? Well, the nice thing is that if a browser doesn't understand what this means, it's just going to ignore it. And most users aren't using one web browser on one machine and then switching to another and getting angry that it looks pretty on one, but on the really old browser, it doesn't look pretty. They usually understand why. And most users are going to be using multiple browsers. So what's really nice is that a lot of these things can be sprinkled in very easily, very quickly, and add a lot to how professional your site looks, how nice it looks, and they just things will still just work fine for those who don't have a browser that supports it. If you really need to, you can use JavaScript libraries that might animate things, but as anybody who's tried that knows, it's pretty tough to get it working well in terms of performance, except on some of the newer browsers where these things are available. So beyond just simple animations where you just go from one state to another, WebKit also has keyframe animations, which basically allow you to, it's not just going from point A to point B, it's going through various different stages. So you can have much more complex animations. Like this example, which is basically taking the idea of the blink tag and making it 10 times worse. But you can see that once again, it's pretty simple stuff of what's happening here in terms of it's just doing scaling and rotating in various different ways. So web fonts, something that I touched on just a little bit earlier, is a really cool way also to spice up your page. A lot of people kind of don't really think that fonts matter that much, but it's when you see a page that has nice fonts that are tailored towards the situation, and then you see one with just kind of the standard web fonts, it makes a pretty big difference. And the nice thing about at FontFace is that it's actually very easy to use now. It's very easy to embed various different fonts. And you can see here, when I hit regenerate, it's basically picking random fonts and random color, or random ways, and kind of doing the old school cutting out letters for a ransom note out of a magazine. But it's surprisingly easy to use, and if you're really interested in this, Google actually even has a free font API that makes it really easy for you to take one of these fonts that's freely licensed for any use that you want, and be able to embed it in your web page directly. But all this stuff, once again, if the user doesn't have this ability in their web page, then it'll just fall back to whatever other fonts are defined. So how many of you have tried to center something vertically with CSS? And how many of you have succeeded? Well, you would probably approximated success, but now with the Flexbox model, it's pretty cool that we actually have a completely native way of doing things like saying something is centered vertically, or similarly, being able to say that in this case, the red and the blue columns are a fixed width. And so as I adjust that, the middle is adjusted. Now these are all things that you could do with JavaScript before, but being able to do this purely in CSS and having it be fully accelerated. Actually, so that's something that I completely neglected and I should have talked about earlier. So one of the biggest reasons to use transitions, even if you have some JavaScript library that can animate things, besides ease of use, the biggest thing is all of these things are hardware accelerated in the latest generation of browsers. So browsers are a lot more sophisticated, so not only, so obviously WebGL, they're going to accelerate. But video is now accelerated by, at least in the experimental version of all the major browsers. And then also Canvas 2D is often accelerated. And then also the transitions are accelerated. So for example, so actually you saw that's a bug that only shows up when things are hardware accelerated. So this whole page right now is actually being done in the GPU. But a lot of the web browsers are also smart enough where if you don't have animations going on, you don't have things that need hardware acceleration, it'll actually fall back to software to save CPU. But the point is that you should trust the web browser to kind of find the right balance of trying to be efficient, but also trying to make your things look good. So how many have seen this? Either, this is actually a t-shirt that I've seen, but, or have produced something like this on their own? Okay, I don't believe you guys. I think more of you have, but yeah, CSS can be a little bit tricky to kind of figure out at first, but it definitely has its payoff, and you can do some cool things like that, and go really crazy. There we go. But you actually notice that. Oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Come on, stop, stop. Oh no. Refresh button. There we go. So you notice how here, so we're using web fonts. We've also got the outline. We've got drop shadow. We've got the shadow around here. So you can obviously go. We have the gradients. So you can obviously go overboard. But the point is that it's very easy with CSS to sprinkle in a lot of awesome into your page. This is a bug. So with that, I want to invite some guest speakers and going to show off some actual uses of HTML5 type stuff. There it was.
Okay. Guess how much time we needed to develop a new HTML5 version in addition to Flash version that we've been developing for 1 year? How much time? 1 week, 2 weeks, month, 2 months? 2 weeks, only 2 weeks with really not full functionality, but with basics features. That's because the major part of the job is already made by browser developers. Really, so everything you need to open up any video in your browser is video tag, right? You don't need anything else. You don't need hacks like Flash to play video. Our goal was to provide the same functionality as Flash users have to iPad users or iOS devices users. So we've made a HTML5 version which is absolutely undistinguishable from the Flash. So can you please show us this? So half of this window, half of this player is Flash, and half is HTML5. Just fun stuff. In Flash version, we already have monetization stuff. We bind it with some ad platforms, and you also can easily integrate this player with some CMS. So basically, that's all. This. Any questions? Basically, it's just the thing that works today already, and it's new technologies, HTML5. Any questions? Yeah? I don't know. Yesterday, I tried to open up a normal video file in Chrome browsers just with video tag, and it was just the same as in VLC, really. So it was about 80 megabytes of RAM and, I don't know, 10% of CPU. I don't know. Flash have its own pros, so yeah, I don't think that for today it's a replacement for the Flash, but it's totally the path to go. Okay. Yes, it works in Firefox. This slider that you saw didn't work. Any other questions? Thank you.
Ale jo, dobrý. Slyšíte mě? Tak já vás zdravím, mé jméno je David Grudl a ukážu vám tady takovou praktickou ukázku, jak se dá používat HTML v praxi. Bude se ta ukázka týkat HTML5 v praxi, bude se to týkat NT frameworků. Takže NT framework vždycky podporoval pokud možno nejnovější technologie, ale takovým způsobem, aby nepodporoval něco, co nejde použít. Jo? Takže i s tím HTML5 jako velmi rychle narazíte na to, že ono to není zas tak pěkný, jak se ukazuje. Začneme tím, vytvoříte si jednoduchý formulář. Já potom ukážu nějaký živý příklad. Předtím, než bylo HTML5, tak takový kód, který nám vytvořil formulář, tak jednak vygeneroval se nějaký validační kód, který u něhož byl problém, že byl vždycky pro každý formulář specifický, protože ten validační kód nese informace o tom, jestli některé políčko je povinné, jaká se má zobrazit textová hláška, když ho uživatel nezadá a tak dále. V podstatě tím, že vám přišlo HTML5, pak se dá tomuto validačnímu kódu vyhnout. Nemusíte kvůli tomu generovat kód, můžete využít toho, že vám vlastně bude ten formulář validovat přímo prohlížeč tím, že podporuje HTML5. Jo, takže takhle by vypadal potom ten stejný formulář HTML5. To znamená, u povinné položky se dá atribut required, můžete tady použít nějaký vlastní validační JavaScript, který bude univerzální a který by vlastně měl validovat v případě, že prohlížeč nepodporuje HTML5. V praxi je to ale trošičku složitější, protože v podstatě ten vlastní validační JavaScript tam není jenom z toho důvodu, aby to fungovalo v prohlížečích bez podpory HTML5, což jsou vlastně dneska všechny kromě Chromu v hlavních verzích a Safari. Ale je tam v praxi se ukázalo, že je tam i kvůli tomu, aby vlastně jakoukoliv podporu HTML5 hnedka vypnul, protože ty prohlížeče se v tom liší. A asi největší problém je, já si sice můžu dát na políčku required, ale co když ho uživatel nevyplní? Jo? Potřebuji mu zobrazit nějakou chybovou hlášku a tohle je věc, kterou HTML5 standard prostě zatím vůbec neřeší. Takže ono je to pěkný, dá se to využívat, ale je potřeba vědět, kde jsou toho limity a je potřeba tam nasadit stejně ten vlastní obslužný JavaScript. Nicméně výhoda je ta, že vlastně můžete udělat ten JavaScript už teďka obecně, jo? Že nemusí být specifický pro každý formulář, ale můžete použít obecný JavaScript. Obrovskou výhodu tady přináší data atributy, to znamená, vy můžete vytvářet další atributy, které mají ten prefix data a do toho můžete dávat různé hlášky. To znamená, můžete vytvořit odkaz, který při kliknutí bude vyžadovat, aby uživatel potvrdil, že skutečně si přeje položku smazat, tak to čistým způsobem takhle vložíte do HTML. Já tady využívám, nebo Nete to využívá tak, že vždycky si ještě ty data atributy prefixuje dalším prefixem Nete a tady si třeba nese informaci o tom, že v případě, že uživatel nevyplní políčko, jaká se mu má zobrazit chybová hláška. To je právě ta věc, kterou ty prohlížeče neumí. Když bychom si to ukázali na takovým praktickým příkladu, můžete si to třeba podívat se na to ve svých mobilních telefonech tady přímo na té adrese. Je tam úplně jednoduchý formulářík, který vlastně využívá HTML5. Já vám ukážu tady zdrojový kód toho formuláře. A tady vidíte, že vytvářím jednotlivé prvky a hnedka na to dávám ty datové atributy, které potom nějak využiju. Nastavuju atributy HTML5, to znamená třeba řeknu, že tohle políčko získá fokus hnedka, jak člověk otevře stránku. Plus tady dávám další validační pravidla. Třeba validační pravidlo pattern s tím, že tam dáte regulární výraz, vám podporuje HTML5 přímo. Problém je v tom, že už nepodporuje tu chybovou hlášku, která se má zobrazit, pokud je to zhráno špatně. Takže tohle vlastně dělá ten framework navíc. Tady vidíte, že si nastavím nějaký typ range, a to bude takové to táhlo, nastavím mu nějakou výchozí hodnotu, zase mu tady dávám nějaké validační pravidlo. Když se podíváme, co nám z toho vznikne, tak v Exploreru se to objeví tímhletím způsobem. Explorer totiž nepodporuje HTML5, takže vidíte úplně klasický obyčejný formulář. Místo toho range je tam textové políčko. Když se na to podíváte prohlížeči, který podporuje HTML5, tak už ten formulář vypadá jinak. Vidíte, že tohle už má automatický fokus, tady mám nějaké táhlo, tady mám, pokud nevyplním žádný text, tak je tam prostě nějaká ta nápověda. Co je důležité, takže v okamžiku, kdy dám odeslat, tak se mě vypisují chybové hlášky, což vlastně standardně HTML5 nedělá. Jinými slovy, vy vytváříte HTML5 formuláře okamžitě tím, že vlastně používáte druhou verzi Nete frameworku. Když si to otevřete, tady tu stránku, co jsem vám ukazoval, když si to otevřete třeba ve svých mobilech, tak můžete vidět, že když si ťuknete na políčko e-mail, tak by se vám měla změnit klávesnice taková, která je uspůsobená na zadávání e-mailů. Tady je ještě ukázka, já jsem si tady v tom zdrojovém kódu nastavil, že u toho prvku bude data search URL a udělal jsem si tam skript, který automaticky prohledává web na daném URL a napovídá mě, jestli už takový nějaký příspěvek nebyl zadán. Takže já, když budu chtít zadat, třeba budu reportovat bug, že mám strašně rád Nete a zadám tady nějaký dotaz, tak on mě už říká, že takovéhle reporty už tady jsou a můžu se podívat, že někdo třeba už něco podobného reportoval a nemusím to tam zadávat znovu. Přímo na té stránce si můžete ten příklad stáhnout, je to úplně triviální použití. Takže HTML5 je výborná technologie, ale je potřeba to vždycky ošéfovat nějakým vlastním skriptem, který právě řeší nejen rozdíly v prohlížečích, ale řeší i nedostatky té HTML5 jako takové. A přispívá to určitým způsobem k uživatelskému prožitku, že třeba tady jsou ty táhla, že jsou tady políčka na e-mail. A je to už teď takhle, jak to vidíte, implementované přímo v NET frameworku. Takže NET framework má dvě hlavní výhody, že jednak nejde v něm udělat tlačítko reset a podporuje HTML5. Takže to je asi všechno, co jsem vám chtěl ukázat.